what of ancient Sri Lanka do you see reflected in the Galle fort?
Well, I think Galle Fort, in relation to ancient Sri Lanka, is a relatively new construct. So if we were to go back to the Anuradhapura kingdom, for example, I think the one similarity is the fact that we like to draw peripheries around things, frames, boundaries, and then do things inside them. And so if we were to go back to Anuradhapura, it's very interesting to see that the peripheries that were drawn were very purposeful. For example, there were royal cities. Anuradhapura was a royal city, was a city in which communities lived, so that it was built on an elevated mount, for example. There were ramparts and forts, there were 4 gateways, and the Mahavamsa very interestingly tells us that one of the 4 quadrants of Anuradhapura was named Yona Sabhagavatta. Now, this is not what I'm saying, this is what Professor Merlin Pires has postulated, but he says that if you were to look at the etymology of Yona Sabhagavatta, it was basically where the Yonas lived. And while today, or until recently, we referred to Yonaka as people of Muslim faith, at that time it was actually people who came from the Ionian Islands, which is essentially Greek. So we had then very possibly a Greek quadrant in Anuradhapura, in the city of Anuradhapura, and it maybe explains why we call ourselves Hella. The Greek called themselves Hellenes as well. And to go from that very livable city with its peripheries, then you go to Sigiriya, which obviously was heavily fortified. It was about 2,700 meters from east to west, 900 meters from north to south. And the reason why these are important is because of the activities that happened within these peripheries. So you had, again, ports, ramparts, double ports, triple ramparts in the west of Sigiriya. You had these incredible water gardens, and I think one of the most amazing heritages of a royal city in Sigiriya. And what's also interesting is its sensitivity to irregular natural features, how those natural features were also absorbed into the design of Sigiriya. And then the other really interesting feature in Sri Lanka is its ancient gardens. So Sigiriya itself is a beautifully constructed, magnificent ancient garden. But then also you have the Ranmasu Uyana in Anuradhapura and Kaludiya Pokuna in Mihintale. So Ranmasu and Kaludiya itself are just masterpieces in garden design, which I'm sure Channa will be far better at explaining than I am. But then if you look at Sigiriya, it has its symmetrical water features. It has the beautiful asymmetry of its organic boulders and rocks. And then it has the cascading, terraced, stepped water features that surround the rock itself. So you can see a very purposeful design that's not just a fortress, not just meant to keep things away, but also it's fairly permeable in the sense that it's also bringing in, attracting ideas, attracting people. And I think that's in a sense what Sri Lanka should be. We shouldn't be keeping things out, we should be bringing things in. And in a sense, all of these peripheries that we have drawn up around ourselves in Sri Lanka, both in ancient and modern times, are spaces designed to, I guess, increase, enhance, and accentuate the productivity of humanity, the productivity of human creativity. And that's a great lesson, I think, not just from the Galle Fort, which is a fairly modern example of what I was talking about, but I think from perhaps our greatest heritage, which is the Anuradhapura, the city of Anuradhapura. And I guess that is the relationship I see, although beyond that it's very difficult to compare a fort built 300 or 400 years ago and the ancient city of Anuradhapura, which is one of the greatest ancient cities the world has ever seen.
What you just said is a great stepping stone to my next question, because you are a media professional, you are all about communications. I'd like to ask you, to what extent do you feel, if the story of Sri Lanka is shared through the lens of art and architecture to a larger perspective to the world, how effective and how well it would represent who we are as a nation?
So I think the key concept here, when considering Sri Lanka's ancient art and architecture and the story that that tells the rest of the world in modern times, is the connectedness that we see in art and architecture. The connectedness. And this goes back to a philosophy that I believe that maybe we've also lost sense of. This philosophy of being one and not apart, not separate. And it's to be seen in our art and culture and our history, but we've somehow lost that connection to that philosophy. And it's very interesting because if you consider how our history, our real history was, well, it progressed throughout thousands of years that the Sri Lankan civilization has existed, it has done so by respecting the land, the sea, the sky, the animals, and humanity. It's never separate. Humans were never separate to any of these things. They were all considered to be one. This is a very, very important philosophy because that's the philosophy that then led to our ancient leaders, our ancient designers, to construct and to think of solutions to the problems we faced then. It was always about how do we resolve this problem permanently, as opposed to how do we solve this problem today and just win a vote tomorrow and stay in power the day after. And so what was the greatest problem our people faced, say, 2,000 or 3,000 years ago? It was the same problem they face today, water. How do we get water from A to B, despite the fact that we have 106 rivers flowing in Sri Lanka? And our ancient designers respected this sense of oneness. So what they did was they came up with this incredible cascade system. Now the cascade system nourishes the soil. It's not just digging up a tank. I hate that word. We should not be using the word tank or reservoir to describe what is a waver. The Sri Lankan waver is an ingenious, incredible construct of the human mind that works within a system. So when you see the Mineria waver, for example, it's not just a single body of water that stands and serves independently. It is connected to maybe 20 or 30 other wavers as part of one single system. Sri Lanka has 900 of them. 900 individual cascade systems. They're called Ellanga Paddhati in Sinhalese. And they were all made by man. And their purpose is not just to irrigate fields, but the purpose is also to nourish the soil. It's to take care of elephants, for example, animals. Elephants had no reason to maraud into human habitat because they had their own wavers in the jungles. And this was just one problem of a myriad that they solved. And it's incredible to think about it because since these wavers were man-made, something that we can all be quite proud of is the fact that I can't think of a single other man-made construction that continues to serve man for over 2,500 years. The pyramids don't except serve as tourist attractions, but the Sri Lankan waver, the Parakrama Samudra, for example, for the past 1,700 years has been serving mankind, has been serving our people. Now, if this isn't sustainability, I'm not sure what is. So, in a sense, I think it's very, very important for us as Sri Lankans to understand Sri Lanka beyond its mercantile potential and look at it as a place where there is spiritual potential for personal transformation, as a place of inspiration for the world who's obviously looking for inspiration and motivation in terms of how do we keep this planet in one piece for the next generation. And it's not going to happen by just these very crazy, manic, quarantine visits where we go to one place and we think we know everything about it. You need to go back to a place over and over again at different times and spend different periods of time in Sri Lanka in order for it to sink into you. And then and only then will it accept you and start speaking to you, and only then will that philosophy truly live in you. And I think that's an amazing opportunity for us as a nation.